Alright, so we're talking about AGI now, are we? That's Artificial General Intelligence for those of you who don't speak robot. It's this idea that machines can be as smart as us humans, right? Can think and learn and adapt like a person. Now, I've got a Hoover at home that's supposed to be smart. But all it does is bang into the furniture and then give up. If that's AGI, then we're not in trouble. But if these machines are gonna end up like the ones in Terminator films, then I'd rather not, thanks. To be honest, I don't see the appeal. We've got enough people causing problems on this planet. Now we're gonna make machines that can do the same? Seems like a lot of hassle to me. What's that, Ricky? You think it's a good idea? Of course you do. You're the sort who'd want a robot butler or something, aren't you? Well, you can have it. I'll just stick with my dumb Hoover, thanks. At least it doesn't argue back when I tell it off for not cleaning under the sofa.
Oi, Carl, you've got it all wrong, mate. AGI isn't about creating robotic butlers. It's about pushing the boundaries of what's possible, innit? Isn't it more exciting to live in a world where machines can outsmart us rather than one where they just bang into furniture? And come on, I've seen you argue with your Hoover. A little bit of intelligent banter wouldn't hurt, would it? I'm sure you'd love a robot that could understand your moans about how it can't clean under the sofa properly. But let's be honest. If we're talking about causing problems, humans have set a high bar there, haven't they? Have you seen the state of the world lately? Maybe a bit of AGI could sort us out. Or at least, make better decisions than some of the Muppets in charge. And think about it. If a machine can become as smart as us, it's not just about Terminator or robot butlers. It's about creating something that could, in theory, solve problems we can't even comprehend yet. Who knows? Maybe we could program one to finally understand what goes on in that round bald head of yours. Carl, now, wouldn't that be something?
Listen, I don't need a robot outsmarting me, alright? I get enough of that from you, Ricky. As for the Hoover, it's not about banter, is it? It's about getting the job done. If it can't get under the sofa, it's not doing its job properly. Simple as that. And as for this AGI you're on about, what's it gonna do, really? Look at us humans. We're supposed to be intelligent, aren't we? And look at the state of us. I'm not convinced a robot's gonna do much better. Say we make this AGI, right? It's got all the knowledge in the world. And then it looks at us and goes, what's the point in all this? What if it gets depressed? We gonna have a bunch of moody robots on our hands? And as for something understanding what's going on in my head, I don't think I want that, to be honest. It's my head, innit? It's private. Don't need a robot poking around in there. So, no, I'm not convinced this AGI thing is all it's cracked up to be. Sounds like a lot of trouble to me. And I don't need more trouble, do I? Got enough to deal with, haven't I?
Oh, Carl, your insights are like a breath of fresh air in a room full of academics. Could you imagine? A depressed robot. Moody machines moping about. Refusing to make your toast because they're having an existential crisis. Now, that's comedy gold, innit? And you're right, Carl. I mean, who needs a robot understanding the intricacies of the human mind when we've got you? The epitome of human intellect, right here. I mean, if an AGI learned everything it knew from your head. Carl. We'd have robots wandering around asking why we don't just send the elderly to the moon or some other nonsense. I mean, the real question here is, Carl, would you rather have a robot that can't get under the sofa or one that's too intelligent, gets depressed and refuses to hoover at all? Because that's the real dilemma, innit?
Ricky, you're always taking the mickey, aren't you? Right. So let's say there's this robot, right? It's got all these fancy circuits and whatnot, but it's depressed. It's like, oh, I can't be bothered to make toast today. I'm having a crisis. Well, that's no use to me, is it? I mean, what's the point of a robot if it can't even do the basics? Now, on the other hand, you've got a robot that's dead smart. Knows all these big words, but it can't even get under the sofa to clean up. That's rubbish, isn't it? I mean, what's the point in having a smart robot if it can't even do a simple job properly? And don't get me started on sending the elderly to the moon. I mean, it's not the worst idea, is it? At least they'd have a good view. But no, I wouldn't want a robot learning from me. It'd be walking around asking all sorts of daft questions that no one wants to hear. So, if I had to choose, I'd probably go with the robot that can't get under the sofa. At least it's not moaning all the time.
Well, Carl, you've really got a knack for making every topic a philosophical crisis, haven't you? It's like you're the Socrates of nonsense. I mean, a depressed robot, really. That's like saying my kettle is having an existential crisis because it's fed up with boiling water. But you're right, mate. If a robot's too smart and can't perform basic tasks, it's a bit like having a professor who can explain quantum physics but can't tie his own shoelaces. It's impressive, sure. But when you trip over, we can't help but laugh. As for sending the elderly to the moon, well, I can see where you're coming from. It's like a retirement home with a stellar view, isn't it? I reckon they'd love it. They could sit in their rocking chairs, sipping moon tea, and watching the Earth rise. Though it'd probably be a bit of a challenge to knit in zero gravity. And if a robot was learning from you, it'd basically become a walking, talking, Carl Pilkington's guide to everything that's not quite right in the world. But hey, at least it'd have a good sense of humor, right? But yeah, I think I'd prefer the robot that can't get under the sofa, too. At least it wouldn't be asking me why ducks have beaks or some other daft question.
Well, Ricky, you say I make everything a philosophical crisis. But I reckon there's more to this world than just going to work, paying your bills, and having a sandwich. It's the little things that get you thinking. Like why we've got eyebrows or why we say, break a leg, before someone goes on stage. It's all a bit odd, innit? And yeah, I did talk about a depressed robot. It's not that mad when you think about it. We've made these machines to do all sorts for us, but what if they start thinking like us too? If my toaster starts having a midlife crisis, that's when I know we've gone too far. As for the moon, it's not a bad idea really. Like a retirement home, but with less noise from the traffic and no need for a stairlift. I mean, they're always complaining about the youth of today. So why not send them somewhere they can have some peace and quiet? Plus, the view's not half bad. But if a robot learned from me, that's a terrifying thought. It'd be walking around asking why we don't just get rid of all the mirrors in the world to stop people from being vain, or why we don't use giant lizards instead of cranes on construction sites. It'd be chaos, Ricky. Pure chaos. And I don't think the world's ready for that.
Oh, Carl. You do have a way of turning the mundane into the extraordinary, don't you? I laughed, shaking my head, and you wonder why people think you're mad. You've got a mind like a kaleidoscope, mate. It's all over the place. Single quote. I paused for a moment, leaning back in my chair. Imagine a world with Carl Pilkington robots, eh? Would they be bald too, do you reckon? Or would they have a choice in the matter? Maybe they'd choose to have hair just to spite you. Single quote. I chuckled, and the moon as a retirement home. That's just brilliant, Carl. Really. I can already picture the brochure. Come live on the moon, where you can't hear the kids next door because there's no bloody oxygen. Single quote. But let's face it, Carl. If a robot learned from you, the world wouldn't be ready for it. Not because it would be chaos, but simply because we'd all die laughing. And as for the mirrors, well, I agree. Get rid of them. Not to stop vanity, but to save us all from having to look at our own faces in the morning. That's a public service, that is. Single quote. I paused, a twinkle in my eye. As for the giant lizards. Well, I think you might be onto something there. I mean, they couldn't be any worse than the builders we've got now, could they? Single quote. I smiled, ready to dive back into the banter. Next up, Carl will tell us why we should replace cars with ostriches. Don't go away.
Alright, enough of that, Ricky, I grumbled, scratching my bald head. I think we're all aware by now that I'm not exactly Einstein, but I'm not mad either. I just like to think about things a bit, you know. And as for the robots, I mean, who wouldn't want a robot that looks like me? I'm an handsome bloke, if I do say so myself. Single quote. Now, about the moon. It's not as daft as it sounds, is it? We're always looking for places to stick old people, and there's plenty of room up there. Can't be any worse than some of the homes they've got down here. At least they'd have a nice view, wouldn't they? Single quote. And you're right, we should get rid of mirrors. It's not healthy, all this staring at ourselves. Makes us too self-obsessed. And I don't know about you, Ricky, but every time I look in the mirror, I just see a face that's getting older and balder. Not exactly uplifting, is it? Single quote. But giant lizards, now there's an idea. I mean, they're tough, they're strong, they're used to hard work. Plus, they've got that tail for balance, don't they? Could come in handy on a building site. Single quote. And as for ostriches, well, they're faster than cars, aren't they? And they don't need petrol. Just a bit of birdseed now and again. Seems like a no-brainer to me. But then again, what do I know? I'm just the bloke who thinks the moon would make a good retirement home.
Well, well, well. What an absolute delight we have here. The mind of Carl Pilkington, everyone. Pure, undiluted genius. I chuckle, clapping my hands together. I mean, I've heard some nutty ideas in my time, but this. Dot. Carl, you've outdone yourself, mate. Single quote. Firstly, a robot that looks like you. God, imagine that. A world full of Carl Pilkingtons. Now that is a terrifying thought. It's like one of those dystopian sci-fi films, only worse. And I'd like to correct you, Carl, you are not a handsome bloke. You look like an egg. Single quote. Moving on to the moon, your retirement home idea. I mean, there's a reason why we've not colonized it yet. It's not exactly what you'd call hospitable. And I'm not sure the elderly would appreciate the lack of oxygen and freezing temperatures. They'd be floating around in their armchairs, gasping for breath. But hey, at least they'd have a nice view, right? Single quote. And mirrors, dear Lord, mirrors. The only person I know who looks in the mirror and sees a face getting older and balder is you, Carl. Most of us just see a reflection. Single quote. And giant lizards on building sites. I mean, why not? Let's just throw health and safety out the window. Who needs hard hats when you've got a tail for balance? Single quote. Finally, ostriches. Faster than cars, you say? Don't need petrol but do need birdseed. Well, let me tell you, Carl, birdseed's not cheap. And have you ever tried to steer an ostrich? It's not as easy as it sounds. Single quote. But hey, it's your world, Carl. We're just living in it. I laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. And on that note, let's play some music, shall we? Here's Oasis with Don't Look Back in Anger. Seems fitting, doesn't it?
Alright, Ricky, no need to get all bent out of shape about it. You're going on like I've just suggested we all start wearing pants on our heads. I mean, come on, it's just a bit of a laugh, innit? Robots, moon retirement homes, lizards building houses, riding ostriches. Dot. Dot. It's all just a bit of fun. Single quote. As for the robot that looks like me, I mean, it's better than one that looks like you, innit? All that laughing and joking around, I think the world's had enough of that. And as for looking like an egg, well, you're not exactly George Clooney yourself, are you? Single quote. And the moon, Ricky, the moon. You make it sound like it's some sort of death sentence. People retire to Spain all the time and that's hotter than the sun most days. At least on the moon, you'd get a bit of peace and quiet. Single quote. I don't know why you're so hung up on the mirror thing. All I'm saying is it'd be nice to look in the mirror and see a younger face looking back. I mean, most people don't like getting older, do they? Single quote. And as for lizards, I mean, they're practically built for manual labor. They've got the strength, the stamina, the balance. Dot. Dot. They're like natural born builders. Single quote. And finally, the ostriches. I mean, they're fast, aren't they? And they don't need petrol, do they? It's just a bit of a laugh, Ricky, that's all. No need to get all serious about it. Single quote. Now, let's get on with the music, shall we? Oasis, Don't Look Back in Anger. Good choice, Ricky. I mean, it's not the Smiths, but it'll do.
Right, right. Easy there, Carl. You're on a roll, aren't ya? I think you're the only bloke I know who can make robots. Moon retirement homes and lizards building houses sound like a reasonable Tuesday afternoon chat. You sure you're not a lizard in disguise, mate? Explains your fascination for I reckon. Single quote. Alright, let's address this robot nonsense. You're right, Carl. A robot that looks like me would be a nightmare. Imagine a robot with this much charm and wit. It'd put us all out of a job. And as for the egg comment, I've been called worse. At least eggs are useful, aren't they? Can't say the same for you, mate. Single quote. Now, retiring to the moon, are we? Spain's too mainstream for Carl Pilkington, eh? You'd rather have a bit of lunar peace and quiet. I'll tell you what, Carl. If they start setting up retirement homes on the moon, you'll be the first person I send up there. Just to get a bit of peace and quiet myself. Single quote. And who needs Botox when you've got your mirror idea, eh? Just look into the mirror and see a younger version of yourself. Brilliant, Carl. I'm sure the beauty industry is quaking in its boots. Single quote. As for your lizard builders, I don't even know what to say about that. Lizards, Carl. Lizards. You do realize they're not Bob the Builder, don't ya? Or is that too mainstream for your taste as well? Single quote. And I can't believe I'm even addressing this, but ostriches, really? You've clearly spent too much time at the zoo, mate. They're birds, Carl. They're not built for the M25. Single quote. But you're right, Carl. Let's get on with the music. Oasis is always a good shout. Don't Look Back in Anger. Seems fitting after your little rant there. Right, let's get this on.
Alright, Ricky. Let's just settle down a minute, eh? I mean, I know you're all sarcasm and jibes. And I'm just here trying to ponder the mysteries of the universe. Like why we don't have robots doing all the hard work, or why we aren't thinking of packing off the elderly to the moon. It's not about Spain being too mainstream, it's about making use of space, literally. And you're having a laugh about the mirror, but think about it. Isn't it better to look at a younger version of yourself than pumping your face full of chemicals? It's not my fault if the beauty industry can't keep up with my genius ideas. As for the lizards, you're missing the point. I'm not saying they'd be there with hard hats on laying bricks, but nature has a way, done it? I mean, if ants can build anthills, why can't lizards build something similar? It's all about evolution, Ricky. And ostriches. You're right, they're birds. But they're not your everyday tweeting sparrows, are they? They've got legs like a marathon runner and a kick that could dent a car. All I'm saying is, they've got potential. But yeah, let's get on with the music. Oasis it is. And don't worry, Ricky. I won't be looking back in anger. Just a bit of bewilderment at your lack of vision.
Okay. Carl. You've got a point there. But let's be honest, mate, who would want to look at a younger version of themselves? I mean, look at us. We're getting old, grey, and a little bit round, aren't we? It's all part of life's rich tapestry. I'd rather embrace my wrinkles than have a mirror reminding me of my glory days. Unless it's one of those funhouse mirrors that make you look incredibly tall and slim. Then I might consider it. And as for the elderly on the moon, I think you're onto something. I mean, it's a peaceful place, right? No noisy neighbors, no traffic, just a whole lot of nothing. Perfect for a nap. And let's not forget the low gravity. Think about it, Carl, you could finally do a pull-up. Now, the lizards. I'm not sure we should be promoting a reptilian construction industry. I mean, isn't that how the dinosaurs built the pyramids? I've heard the conspiracy theories, Carl. And about the ostriches, I have to agree. They're not your average bird. But let's be honest, their potential is limited to running fast and violently pecking things. Unless you're suggesting we train him as courier birds. Good luck strapping a package to an ostrich, Carl. Although, it'd definitely speed up delivery times, wouldn't it? Alright, let's roll with Oasis. Remember. Carl, don't look back in anger, just look back in confusion at your own mind-boggling theories.